Welcome into the Norfolk vegetable garden here in the mid-Norfolk cottage garden, and we're going to talk a little bit about raspberries. Cane raspberries. We grow two different distinct versions here. The two rows here on the left of the frame are the traditional raspberries which fruit on the previous season's canes, and the row between these stakes just behind the artichokes are autumn flowering raspberries, which are cut down every year to the base. You can see where these were cut down last year, and they're just starting to emerge, and it's on this year's growth and canes that they fruit later in the season, starting in July and August. Now you'll see along these rows I've got a lot of work to do. We've got little shoots of raspberry canes coming up down the middle of the rows, far too far away from any of the supports to be able to tie in, and if you leave these in here, they are going to take a lot of strength and growth and continue to grow away, and what will happen is that the canes that are starting to emerge along the lines of the supports, which are the ones we want to encourage to grow strongly and to tie in next year, will not be as strong as if we remove these. So we're going to hoe all these out. I've also in this patch got an enormous amount of bindweed, which I admit is a complete nightmare. You can't dig it out in this situation because the raspberry roots in these established rows are very close to the surface, and you can see where the raspberry canes are shooting. Under every single one of those is a feeding raspberry root, and if I start digging those out to get the bindweed, I'm going to damage that root system and weaken my raspberry crop. So it's a war of attrition for this bindweed. I'm just going to let it grow on a little bit, and then when it gets to around this stage, we're just going to pull it very gently, try and find the direction that the root goes in and get as much of the bindweed root out as possible. But I'm just going to have to continue pulling this by hand. There's no other way really. I could use probably a weed killer, a touch weed killer, but I'm not keen on doing that. I tend to try and grow as much organically as we possibly can here. So just by pulling everything off that's emerging through the surface, gradually I'll weaken the bindweed, and I'm going to try and do that sequentially through this season and literally take the heads off it so it can't get any nutrition, and eventually I hope I'll get on top of that. The other thing worth checking is with the canes that you've tied in and saved from last year, they should be sprouting by now, as these are, but some won't be. This one, for instance, is not showing any signs of bud break yet and may well have been killed by frost damage over the winter, but I'm just going to give it another couple of weeks because some of these canes are only just starting to break some bud at the moment, like this one. Try and get that in focus. So I'm not absolutely going to rule these out for at least another fortnight, but at that stage, if there's any dead canes in this row, no point leaving them in. Take them out, tidy the row up, and then we will hopefully start getting a good crop of raspberries from a decent set of canes that aren't harbouring too much in the way of disease. And then they will fruit early summer, usually by Wimbledon week. We're starting to pick some raspberries in this garden. We are a little sheltered with having the wall on the back, and then the autumn raspberries come in about a month later, and they are a lot easier to grow because you're not having to tie or discern New Year's canes from old year's canes over the winter. You're just basically taking everything down to the ground and just leaving the stems, which will then start growing away and give you the crop each year. And we tend to find the birds don't eat the autumn flowering raspberries the same way that you're fighting them for the summer raspberries. I think it's just because there is so much more food available for them at the time that these come into fruit. So no nets are required for the autumn flowering raspberries, and I'm tending to grow more and more of those just because I'm not having to net the crop. So a good tip there if you're trying to decide which one might be best for you. Certainly in terms of maintenance and care, you almost could grow autumn flowering raspberries without any supports at all, so one less expense as well.